How about every summer we meet for a trip?
Vacation has officially begun on Netflix.
To best enjoy your trip, we suggest the following itinerary.
I say we just wing it.
Wing it.
See where the wind takes us.
From best-selling author Emily Henry
Are you guys like a thing?
Oh no, we're just friends. Platonic travel companions.
comes your next favorite rom-com.
Who wants to go skinny dipping? Alex does.
Vacation, Alex!
I love it when you get weird.
People We Meet on Vacation, now playing on Netflix. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare.
What's up, everyone? I'm your host, Will, and you're listening to One Good Scare, the show where we explore the best in horror movies. This week, we're exploring one of my favorite horror movies of 2025, maybe a little-known indie flick, called Traumatika. Before we dive in, though, don't forget you can follow One Good Scare on Instagram, at OneScarePod, and TikTok, at One Good Scare Pod. Make sure to follow, leave a comment or two. You guys know by now that I love interacting and discussing. Also, be sure to leave a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Pods. Lets me know you're enjoying the show, and that goes a long way to keeping it going. And remember, my goal with One Good Scare is not to replace your viewing experience. It's to enhance it. So if you haven't seen Traumatika, my strong encouragement is to do that first, then come back and give the show a listen. Of course, if you'd rather listen than watch, I appreciate that as well. Just remember, One Good Scare is one gigantic spoiler. Alright, let's dive into what I think is a really great, really terrific horror movie, Traumatika. I should probably start by saying that even though I really enjoyed this movie, overall audiences were pretty split. And it seems the reviews reflect this. IMDb has it at a 5.2 out of 10, Rotten Tomatoes lists it at a 68% with a 41% popcorn meter, and Fandango has it at 41%. I'll also add that while I loved it, the movie is a bit frustrating at times, because in some places it really, really excels, and in others, I think it falters. I'll talk more about it as we go, but there's a stark ebb and flow between acts, but I do feel like if you can get through it, the great parts are really, really great. And one of the highlights of the film is Rebecca Kennedy, who plays Abigail. Guys, she is fantastic in the lead role. One other thing, unlike recent episodes, I actually don't have a guest for today, so I'll cut in a bit more than usual, and as we move forward into the new year, I'll intersperse solo episodes with guest interviews. Alright, settle in, turn down the lights, and let's explore a dark, harrowing, terrific horror movie, Traumatika. The movie opens with the following words set against a black screen. In psychology, there are 5 forms of childhood trauma: physical neglect, witnessing violence, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. Soft vocals play as the scene shifts to the Sinai Peninsula at 1910, and then shows a dead animal rotting in the desert. The camera pans over the sand, and we see a man stumbling under the baking sun. He pulls a knife and kneels to the ground before the scene shifts to him stumbling in the desert once again. He falls to his knees, his breathing ragged, and he uncovers a small idol in the shape of a camel. He says, "Creator of evil, creator of chaos, Volpazu, taker of children." We see a quick flash to a child, possibly his child, before he buries the idol in the desert sand. He then says, "Ashraf, my son, forgive me," before screaming, "Why?" We catch another quick flashback to his child and what appears to be blood and guts. The man then raises the knife before stabbing himself in the stomach. We see it penetrate, followed by a quick flash to the bloody guts once again. And then we watch as he moves back and forth while kneeling in the sand, before we catch a quick glimpse of a demon stepping out of a doorway and the knife exiting his skin. Then the screen cuts to black. We then see the idol partially buried in the sand with the man's blood all around, soaking into the sand. And we see him dead, blood pouring from his mouth as the camera pans towards the sky, the word Traumatika appearing before stopping abruptly. The movie then picks up in 2003, Pasadena, California. A phone rings, and a child tells 911 dispatch that his mother scares him at night. The dispatch asks for his name, and he says Mikey. She asks where he is, and he tells dispatch that he's under the table. The operator asks if his mother heard him, and if she's in the house with him, and if he's hiding. She asks again where his mother is, and he whispers, "I don't know. Mommy is a monster." She tells him to stay hidden and tells him there are people on the way to help him. Just then, we hear cackling laughter off in the distance, and the camera pans around the room. Now it's as if we're seeing from Mikey's point of view. The operator tells him she needs him to say something, but as the camera pans, we see hair hanging over the edge of the table, and the demonic face of Mikey's mother staring directly at him. Mikey crawls from underneath the table as his mother growls, and we catch a quick split-second glimpse of her crawl sprinting towards him. We watch from his point of view as he runs through the house, his mother chasing and growling behind him. Mikey blinks a few times, his breath shaky as he runs towards a door. Now in a different room we watch, again from his point of view, as his mother's arm slides the door open. Mikey, now in a full-blown panic, reaches for another door. We then see from his point of view as he peeks through a small opening, as creaking and whimpering is heard in the background. As Mikey stares ahead at a baby doll, a shadow passes by, and we see his mother walking towards the bathroom. She says in a sing-songy voice, "It was just a little jokey joke." Mikey watches as she stoops low, then walks off, her breathing shaky. Then we hear in a raspy voice, "It was just a joke," before she steps back into the frame. Now tearful, she says out loud, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She kneels low and crawls towards Mikey, babbling in a low guttural voice, which quickly turns into a deep snarl. Suddenly, she stands up and runs off screen, leaving Mikey by the doorframe. He steps out, and we see again from his point of view, as he walks through the room towards where his mother just ran. But then, we hear the snarling from behind him, and when Mikey turns, we see her crawling out from under the bed. Once again, we watch from his point of view as he runs through the house, his mother snarling and giving chase. He reaches the far end of the house, and when he turns around, she's still right behind him, growling and crawl sprinting on all fours. He opens a door and enters a room, except all we see is a black door with a cross hanging in the middle, and all we hear is his mother growling behind him. Mikey blinks, his breath shaky, as the door opens slowly and his mother steps inside briefly before stepping out and slamming the door shut, causing the cross to fall onto the floor. Mikey watches for a moment as it lays there, before looking up at the doorframe and seeing his mother looking in at him from the partially cracked door. Suddenly, she bursts in and rushes towards him, and for a split second, we see her demonic face. Then the camera fades to black. Alright, holy shit. These opening minutes are some of the most aggressive and angry that I've seen in a horror movie in a long time. In some ways, it's reminiscent of the Evil Dead reimagining from 2013. There's something else. I'm a huge fan of the first-person point-of-view shots where we see everything unfold through Mikey's eyes. To me, it's reminiscent of Halloween. And listen, I'm not comparing these two movies side by side, with the exception of the first-person point of views in the opening scenes. And I may be in the minority here, but first-person point of view shots to me tend to be more anxiety-inducing. We lose that over-the-shoulder perspective, which includes peripheral views, overhead shots, on and on. The narrow perspective of a first-person shot, coupled with Mikey's blinking eyes, it really does a great job of keeping this scene tense. It's sort of like when I'm playing scary video games with my boys. Right now, we're all into Phasmophobia, and it's that first-person limited perspective that leaves you feeling like, well, something is watching you just off camera. That's what this scene evokes. Alright, let's get back into it. The next scene takes us back to the house, as a young boy and his mother watch a news report about a child who went missing 9 months prior. Mikey watches fearfully, when suddenly we see his mother. She has scaly wounds all over her face and a split lip. She looks at him with dark eyes and a horrible grin, before laughing and turning back to the television. The news report continues and shows the mother of the missing boy calling for him. His name is Mikey. The boy, still fearful, looks over at the woman, who is now possessed. Her eyes are pitch black and her grin is menacing. Suddenly, in the distance, we hear police sirens and see flashing lights. The woman is startled and looks out the window. A sheriff's deputy bangs on the front door, and the woman tells the boy that he's going to hide really well and not make a sound. She tells him if she hears or sees anything, that the monster will come and get him. Then, in a deep growling voice, she tells him to run. We watch from Mikey's point of view as he runs and hides, and the sheriff's deputy continues to bang on the door once again. The woman opens the door, and the officer says they received a 911 call, and that he wants to check to make sure everything is okay. The woman says everything is fine, but the lights and banging scared her. The officer asks if she's alone in the house, and the woman confirms that she is alone. The officer asks to come inside, but the woman says she was in the middle of something and then was getting ready for bed. The officer insists, and the woman asks if he needs a warrant. The officer says he doesn't and tells her to step away from the door. She does, reluctantly. The officer steps into the home, and then we watch as the woman grins devilishly as she closes the door. Now inside, the officer looks around the home and spots a child's toy on the floor. He asks if she has any children in the house, and we see her standing behind him in the entryway. He calls to her, but when he turns around, she's gone. The officer pulls out his flashlight and walks around slowly, calling out to her while doing so. Somewhere in the distance, we hear her saying, "Come here, little boy. Come here." The officer calls for backup and pans the room with the flashlight, calling out to the woman. He asks her to show herself, and suddenly we hear quick footsteps running towards him. He turns, but no one is there. He continues through the house and walks into the bathroom, where he discovers a bathtub filled with blood. Suddenly, his walkie-talkie plays police chatter, startling the officer. He speaks and tells dispatch to hurry up. Something is wrong at the house. He tells them he found a tub full of blood. Then, somewhere in the distance, he hears a low guttural voice saying, "We're gonna play hide and seek. Ready or not, here I come." He turns and pulls his gun before walking through the house with his flashlight. He continues to call to the woman and warns that he will shoot her. He walks slowly through the house before coming to a set of basement stairs. He tells her he's coming down the stairs and warns her to lay flat on the ground with her hands where he can see them. He walks down slowly, and when he gets to the bottom, he scans the room. At first, there's nothing unusual, but then he scans the floor and sees what appears to be 3 bodies wrapped in white sheets covered in blood. Startled, he notices black candles next to the bodies, and he calls in to dispatch, letting them know he's found potential bodies at the home. They look like children. He asks where his backup is. Then he pulls back the sheet on one of the bodies. It's a young boy. Suddenly, we hear low growling, and when he turns around, we're now looking from his point of view. We see the woman standing in the entryway to the staircase. She's bent at the waist, her hair is hanging down, and her arms are swaying back and forth almost rhythmically. She snarls and growls and then picks her head up. Her eyes are white, and then she rushes towards the officer. He fires several shots, and then the scene shifts to Mikey's point of view. He steps out from his hiding place and whispers, "Mommy." Suddenly, the officer lunges out of the opening and sits on the ground. He radios to dispatch that the child is in the house, before he's suddenly yanked into the basement by something powerful and unseen. Mikey goes back to his hiding place as we hear low growling in the distance, and the sheriff screaming. We then see blood on the basement wall before the scene fades to black and the words, 1 year earlier, appear on screen. And this is the end of Act 1. Okay, holy shit times 2, guys. Alright, this was one of my favorite opening acts in a horror movie by far. The lighting, the camera angles, close-in shots, zoom-out shots, claustrophobic setting, all of it combines to give you a horrifying, sort of immersive experience that honestly just sort of sits with you, tingles your senses, leaves you feeling horrified without actually seeing too much of what's on screen. I've mentioned it already, but this entire opening is just mean and angry. Something sinister is going on underneath, and it looks like we're being set up for the backstory. What's interesting, though, is that the prologue sets us up with some sort of ancient evil force that ties in somehow. And the 1 year earlier at the end of Act 1 looks like it's the bridge between then and now. Somewhere along the way, the demonic force back then was uncovered and unleashed now in the modern times. Now, I'll say this also just before we dive into Act 2, that the lightning fast pacing of Act 1 slows down considerably in Act 2 and even more so in Act 3. Now, that's not a bad thing, but as the movie becomes more character and story driven, some of its flaws are more noticeable. But the depth of the story also becomes evident, and I'll give you a quick trigger warning. It deals with some really sensitive issues, including sexual abuse and trauma, abortion, and more. Be warned. Let's jump back in right after this quick ad break. Act 2 opens back at the home as a man leaves a message on an answering machine. He pleads for a woman, Charlotte, to pick up the phone before cussing her out and hanging up. He sips from a drink and then opens an object wrapped in a white cloth and rope. It's the idol from the start of the film. He picks it up and the phone rings, the voice on the other line asking if he has it. The caller says it's a strange thing that people online are saying is a portal for a demon to come out if you take off its head. The man, John, says he doesn't believe in it, but the caller says he needs it intact in order to sell it for $50,000. John says he needs the money too, as his divorce is costing him a fortune. We then see a quick glimpse of the woman, the demon-possessed woman, and their child. The caller asks if his children are with him, and warns him that he needs to keep the idol away from children because the demon Volpazu preys on children to sacrifice them or turn them into demons. John laughs it off, and the caller asks if he's going to open it. John says he will call him back. John sips his drink, and we get a flashback to the opening of the movie. He then picks up the idol and examines it before unscrewing its head and taking it off, letting out smoke and a low grumble. The scene cuts to his daughter, the demon-possessed woman, who is watching television with her sister Alice. John tells her it's time for bed, and she goes to her room reluctantly. John sits next to the woman and sips his drink, laughing at the television. She sits next to him, a throw pillow pulled up to her chin. He picks at her, and we hear a soft whisper in the background. Suddenly, John is staring in the bathroom mirror as a low guttural growling is heard. He stares strangely in the mirror, laughing at his reflection as the growling continues. Then he turns back towards the bedroom where the woman, his daughter, is laying in bed, shaking. As he lays on top of her, we catch a quick glimpse of the demon, and then him putting his shirt back on. He tells her not to say anything to their mother or her sister. He says it's their little secret, and asks her to promise him that she won't tell anyone. And to tell might make the monster come out. The next scene shows the woman getting water at the kitchen sink as we hear growling coming from the idol. As she heads back into the bedroom, we see John crawling towards her, on the ceiling. The scene takes us to the dark bedroom, where she's sound asleep. John stands in the shadows of the room, and she's startled awake, but seemingly pinned to the bed. When she looks down at the foot of the bed, she sees John biting her feet. She screams as he bloodies her foot and as he crawls up towards her. Suddenly, we see two sets of hands, John's and the demon's, grabbing at her face. John vomits into her mouth, and the woman screams as a cross falls from the floor. John finishes vomiting, and the woman opens her eyes and smiles. Her possession is now complete. The scene then takes us outside the home as the woman walks outside and John vomits in the toilet. The phone rings and he asks his ex-wife if Abigail, his daughter, is with her. The two converse about the previous night, and John says he had too much to drink. John's ex-wife says she's coming over right now, and he agrees. The scene shifts back to Abigail as she sits in a small room, rocking back and forth as low groans are heard. She's holding a pregnancy test that reveals she's pregnant. Suddenly, Abigail reaches for a metal hanger, puts one end over a candle flame, and gives herself an abortion. The scene shifts back to the home, where Alice is talking to Abigail on the phone. She says something happened, and that she can't come home, and that no one will believe her. Abigail apologizes and says she needs to see somebody at church. Abigail tells her not to come look for her, before hanging up. She is in and out of consciousness as the television plays. First a cartoon, then graphic images and shots of the demon, before cutting to static, and then back to the cartoon finally. John tells Abigail that he chose her, and that she betrayed him by killing his child. John says now she has to pay, and we watch as Abigail is brutalized by John, who says Abigail was chosen to be his handmaid. Except here's the thing. Abigail is pinned to the couch as all of this happens. John then takes a butcher knife and cuts into Abigail's arm, but we watch as she does it to herself. John then says the demon will take Alice instead of her. In the next scene, we see Abigail pleading with the demon to leave Alice alone. A low growling can be heard, and suddenly we see the demon standing in the doorframe. John says the demon wants a boy, and that Abigail has to find him. Suddenly, Abigail is possessed. The next scene shows a young boy in a park. He's wandering from his babysitter towards a stone structure off to the side. As he moves further in, where he's out of view of his babysitter, he meets the now possessed Abigail. She attacks him, and in the next scene, we watch as she's horrified over what she's done. The young boy is dead in her bathtub. John, standing next to her, says the boy wasn't the one, that he wasn't special, and that he wasn't drawn to the darkness. John says she has to find another one, and tells her about a specific boy. Abigail says she can't, but John says she can. Suddenly, we flash back to the scene with the officer from earlier, from when he was taken into the basement. He's been killed, and we see from Mikey's point of view as he finds Abigail standing next to a wall. Noise is heard overhead, and Abigail says she did it for him, speaking of the demon, who continues growling. Abigail tells Mikey she tried to protect him, and that she failed. Near sobbing, she says she can't do it anymore, and apologizes to Mikey. As the demon approaches, Abigail grabs the officer's gun, says, "I'm in hell forever," and shoots herself in the face. Mikey takes off running, trying to get the flashlight to work, and as it sputters, he sees the demon kneeling on one end of the hallway. As soon as the light hits, it begins crawl sprinting towards him. Mikey, searching for a place to hide, moves from room to room as he hears the demon all around him, until suddenly, it appears in a doorway. Mikey quickly grabs the officer's gun and shoots the demon as it approaches. The scene then cuts back to the news report from earlier in the film, with Mikey's mother saying she will find him. Meanwhile, Mikey is covered in blood as we hear police sirens approaching. A radio broadcast gives breaking news about the horror at the home of Abigail Reed. Meanwhile, John sits in the bathtub, listening, before wailing. 3 children, along with Abigail, are dead, but Mikey was found alive. As the broadcast plays, John grabs the radio and places it into the bathtub full of water, electrocuting himself. And this is the end of Act 2. Alright, holy shit times 3. So like I mentioned, the pacing in this act is much slower and much more deliberate than Act 1. And this time we trade fast scares for maybe more intentional horror. Now it's not just demon-possessed Abigail chasing Mikey and snatching cops. It's John assaulting his daughter, and the terror it causes her. And it seems as though the demonic possession may actually be a metaphor for the cyclical nature of abuse and trauma. There's a common criticism I hear when it comes to movies involving demonic possession. They're all the same. They're not scary, and they're predictable. And here's the thing. I hear it. And in lots of cases, I actually agree. But what I appreciate about Traumatika, and I'm not talking about execution just yet, is that it takes a risk and gives us an interesting angle on a familiar topic or trope. It's true that if you've seen one demonic possession movie, you've likely seen them all. Scary faces, scary eyes, voices, change in character, temperament, personality, disposition, all of that is here. But it seems like this movie is trying to orient our thinking to something a bit deeper, which I'll talk more about at the end of Act 3. Also, I was really surprised by Abigail's death scene, and for the first 30 seconds or so, I thought it was a hallucination, and if I'm honest, I was surprised by how sad I felt after watching it. And I think it's because I realized that where Act 1 makes her out to be the villain, Act 2 shows us she's actually an unwilling and helpless victim who simply wants to end the destructive cycle. More on that in a little bit. We'll jump into Act 3 right after this quick ad break. Act 3 opens with the words 20 years later on a black screen. We watch as a woman gets her makeup done. She's prepping for an interview with Alice, Abigail's younger sister. Alice has written a book detailing her family trauma. As the interview plays, we move back to Abigail's home, where we hear the demon making low guttural noises. She then says that Mikey was the sole survivor, and that she would want him to know she's sorry for what he went through, and that she thinks of him often. We then see Mikey sitting in a rocking chair, watching the broadcast. Shortly after, Alice is on the phone telling the other person that she shouldn't have gone on the show, as the host is simply exploiting the tragedy for ratings. As she talks, the doorbell rings, and 3 trick-or-treaters dressed as ghosts stand outside her door. Later that night, she watches as Mikey's mother talks about how the tragedy affected him. Mikey's psychiatrist says he suffered from severe PTSD. His mother says he didn't share much about what went on in the house, and that he was numb. In an interesting twist, the psychiatrist says Mikey considered Abigail to be his mother, and that he may have Stockholm Syndrome. His real mother showed pictures of Mikey's drawings, monsters. The psychiatrist says Mikey was obsessed with the 3 children's bodies found in the basement. The connection between Mikey and the children is unknown, though it's believed he considered himself one of them. Then John's friend from earlier in the film says it's John's fault for letting out the demon. As Alice stands in the bathroom, her doorbell rings, and this time, a single child dressed as a ghost stands outside. She offers the ghost more candy, but the ghost child just stands there silently. She places candy in his bucket and closes the door, and the child walks away. Back in her bedroom, Alice is watching the broadcast when her cell phone buzzes. She picks it up and hears the low, guttural, demonic babbling. She tells the caller to fuck off, but it continues. Suddenly, Abigail's voice breaks through, whimpering that he's going to hear her. In a raspy voice, she tells Alice that their father raped her and put a monster inside of her. Then, a sudden scene shift shows Abigail running down the hallway and the demon standing on the other side. Alice is then startled awake from her nightmare by the doorbell ringing. Alice walks towards her front door slowly, where she finds a child dressed in a ghost costume standing outside. She opens the door and asks where the child's parents are, and then the ghost stands up. It's actually an adult. The scene cuts to black, and we see Alice loading a gun in her bedroom, and when she steps out, the adult ghost is sitting in her dining room. She sits in front of it and asks, "Why are you here, Mikey?" He tells her that she's not safe anymore, and that the demon is out there again. He says his mother, Abigail, can't protect her anymore. Mikey says he has these thoughts, dark thoughts, and they want him to do terrible things because he's the one. Mikey says he doesn't want to be the chosen one. He starts sobbing, and Abigail tries to reassure him. But Mikey says she's not safe anymore. He says Abigail was innocent, before suddenly grabbing Alice's hand. We then see flashbacks to Abigail, and Alice says she knows. Alice says she can't be Mikey's mother, and that Mikey needs to go home. He pulls her tightly, and Alice begs for him to let her go. She points the gun at him, and says he needs to get out now. Mikey says he's sorry that he brought the demon with him to her house. Suddenly, we hear footsteps and growling. Mikey stands up quickly and runs out of the house, leaving Alice alone. She heads back to her bedroom and hears a click somewhere behind her. When she looks, the demon is standing there, partially hidden in the shadows. Mikey sits outside, rocking back and forth, and then we see a flashback to when he was a child. The demon stalks him before possessing him. The scene cuts to black. The next scene shows a guy pulling up in an SUV. He's rehearsing what he's going to say to Alice, when suddenly he sees Mikey standing at the top of the driveway. As he gets out, Mikey walks away into the shadows. Suddenly, Mikey shows up behind him and stabs him multiple times, and we flash back to young Mikey. After killing the guy, he takes his jacket and hat and places him in the trunk. The next scene takes us to the show host's SUV as she talks about the tragedy of Alice and her boyfriend. It's going to be a ratings bonanza, and she tells her assistant to get Alice back on the show immediately. The show host pulls up to the studio and finds it empty. Lights are off, cameras on the floor. There's no one around. Except she hears footsteps, and when she calls her assistant, her cell phone rings in the distance. The show host walks through carefully before her assistant whispers her name. She's covered in blood and says he killed everyone. The assistant tells her to hide as Mikey shoots someone else walking in. The two then hide as Mikey walks the studio, stalking for victims. The show host splits from her assistant, and to create a distraction, throws her shoe where the assistant is hiding. Mikey hears it and shoots the assistant dead. The show host, trying to escape, is bludgeoned by Mikey, but when he goes to shoot her, he's out of bullets. She then tases him and calls 911. But as she's talking to dispatch, Mikey shows up with a knife and attempts to stab her. But then Alice tells him to stop. She says she will be his mother and that she will take care of him and that he doesn't have to be alone anymore. She pleads for him to put the knife down, and when he does, she says it's going to be okay. But then the demon takes over, and Mikey starts strangling Alice. Suddenly, the show host stabs Mikey in the face, killing him. And as the two stand there, she asks Alice if she's available for an interview the next day. Then the word Traumatika shows up on screen, and the end credits roll. And Traumatika has come to an end. Well guys, that's the end of the movie, and I mentioned at the start that Traumatika feels a bit frustrating at times because it ebbs and flows, and I really think this is especially evident in Act 3. Alright, let's break it down this way. Act 1 is set in the present. The events are unfolding in real time, and we watch as they occur. Act 2 is mostly set in the past, 1 year before the events of Act 1. We get the backstory, the development, the plot lines that serve as a runway to Act 1. The end of Act 2, though, ushers us back to the present day, where we watch in horror as tragedy unfolds. But then Act 3 shoots us forward 20 years, where we see Mikey and how the trauma of 20 years earlier is affecting him now as an adult. And I think that's the struggle I have with Traumatika. The constant time jumps aren't difficult to keep track of, but they present 3 distinct timelines and storylines. And because the pacing of each is very different, the movie feels really disjointed. And you see this especially with the final act. Now I get it. If Traumatika is a metaphor for the cycle of abuse and generational trauma, then Act 3 shows in gory detail what that actually looks like. For the now adult Mikey, the trauma of his childhood becomes the catalyst for perpetuating the cycle and inflicting trauma of his own. Except this third act feels largely rushed and incomplete because to that point, Mikey was not the centerpiece of the movie. Abigail was. Now, I'll say it up front, I realize I'm not a screenwriter, so I always levy criticism carefully and specifically, but I think Act 3 could have been folded into Act 2. Here's how. First, flash forward 20 years, where Abigail's sister Alice is navigating the complexities of her own childhood trauma. Show us its effects on her personally, on her career, on her relationships, all of those things, but largely leave Mikey out of it. Second, if you're going to bring Mikey in, do it more indirectly. Instead of showing him as an adult character, which really truly was disjointed from the rest of the movie, have Abigail's sister inquire about where he is or how he's doing. Then, she can discover through some other means, newspaper clippings, news reports, whatever it is, that he committed some kind of atrocity and that he struggled for most of his life. I'm not saying that showing Mikey's trauma was a poor choice. I'm saying there are ways to keep the emotional movement of the film without having shown Mikey's rampage explicitly. For me, Traumatika is one of those movies where I would have really wanted to sit with the emotional heaviness of the overall message. More like a well damn kind of moment, rather than an oh shit kind of moment. All in all though, the message of Traumatika was, and using demonic possession as the vehicle to carry us through was a really great and unique idea. For me, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars and have it listed as one of my 10 favorite horror movies of 2025. If you've seen it, where does it rank for you? I want to hear your thoughts. Alright, that does it for this episode of One Good Scare. Of course, I don't take it for granted that you're spending your time with me. Be sure to join me next time as we explore one of the greatest sci-fi horror movies ever made, Alien. I'm your host, Will. See you next time on One Good Scare.